marker saying live on YouTube.
All right.
see it. It just popped up.
Yep.
Okay, good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Worcester City Council held by Zoom, video conferencing, and YouTube this Monday, June 1st, 2020. It's after 7:30 p.m. We took a little break after an hour plus finance committee meeting, so that's why it's starting a little later than normal. The next meeting is scheduled for Monday, June 15th, 2020. And unless things drastically change, it also will be Zoom video conferencing and YouTube. Mr. Paulo, as clerk of council, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Mr. Ansel,
Here.
Mr. Bostancic,
Here.
Mr. Cavan,
Here.
Mr. Myers,
Here.
Mr. Sanders,
Here.
Mr. Silvestri,
Here.
and Ms. Warden.
Here.
Well, everyone's accounted for. I can't say present since we're in about half a dozen different places or more, but we do have a quorum. The agenda will remain as presented, and at this time, I would ask that you stand and join the members of City Council in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
Under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
for all.
Thank you very much. Looking for approval of the minutes of the May 18th, 2020 meeting, which just seems like it was just around the corner.
So moved.
Who was that, please?
Craig.
All right, Craig Sanders moved to approve the May 18th minutes. Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Ms. Warren. At least I again recognize your voice, Ms. Warren. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Is there a reason?
I'm sorry. I said aye, no nay, Mr. Bitenick.
Okay, I just heard the nay and I didn't know if you were playing horsey with your kids or you had something that you didn't like about the minutes. So anyways, okay. Anyways, however you count them, we have sufficient votes to approve the minutes of May 18th, 2020. Communications from the mayor and administration, item 3 on the agenda. Mr. Mayor, welcome.
Thank you, President Bitendijk and members of City Council. Nice to see everybody this evening, and we look forward to having a good meeting throughout the evening. Just some things to report to you. Things are continuing to reopen per Governor DeWine and Dr. Atkin. Things are starting to work their way back towards a normal in our city, but people are being very cautious and careful in how that is happening. So I think it will take a few weeks to start getting people spun back up towards a normalcy. Freelander Pool is full of water now, and it is being heated. We will be training the guards that will be staffing that pool this year next week with an opening date of June 15th. Our recreation division has been putting things together. So looking at the restart of evening classes in the near future, and soccer training started today. Chalet rentals are coming back online with the first one coming up here in mid to late June. And Learn and Play is getting ready to reopen. So engineering, Highland Avenue reconstruct has started last week with a November finish planned. And if you've been by there, you see a lot of activity going on. Bricks for our downtown are on a delivery schedule for mid-June at this point. And with that, our project for the Southeast Quad is still on schedule for completion by the end of September. Many important projects are on tonight's council agenda. We have CRA votes on Caliber Holdings, which is affiliated with Nagy's, and Ray and Associates building in the Old Horn Nursing Home property are on your agenda. Daisy Way extension to Old Airport Road, our transportation enhancement district or improvement district, and jobs and commerce both put quite a bit of money into that connection. So it's something we are looking forward to having that completion yet this year. Lincoln Street water line replacements on using CDBG funds for $300,000 and then $300 coming from our water fund. 2021-22 CDBG allocation. We talked about at the committee meeting earlier tonight. We're asking for $50,000 to the Vi Startsman Free Clinic and $100,000 for the Salvation Army Day Center, which we were conversed about earlier. Freelander Park electric service replacement and upgrade. We have an old system there that is really in need of upgrade, and that is on your agenda for this evening. The chalet roof replacement. We have a 20-year plus old roof on the chalet, and after all the improvements we've made there, we don't want it to start leaking down into the facility. Wayne County EZ amendment request for certified Angus beef. It's something that you as council passed at one of our last meetings. This is just something that needs to be done to satisfy how the county deals with their enterprise zone. So that'll be fully explained by the person bringing that forward tonight. Charter Review Commission recommends 5 ballot issues, and I think they've done an excellent job for our city, and it will be talked about again further in detail when it comes before you. Finance request for a tax budget and a report on the bond sale. I'm going to turn it over to Andre because he is the finance master, and he can explain both of those in much greater detail for us. Andre?
Hello, everyone. So tonight is our statutorily required tax budget for the year 2021. And this will just be submitted to the Budget Commission of Wayne County for setting our millage, which is at 4.2 mils. I am pleased to report that thanks to the collaboration between the legislative and executive branch of Wooster City government, we were able to save our taxpayers, our stakeholders, $1.4 million by refinancing about $12.9 million in existing debt. Specifically, that relates to the water fund savings of $454,000, sewer fund $393,000, and the general fund or for the safety center $563,000. And we kept all the maturities of the same. So the water will mature in 11 years, the sewer will mature in 20, and the safety center in 16. So the interest cost on that was 1.79%. So it was phenomenal. So very excited about that. So thank you for your support with that.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank you, Andre. I appreciate you informing folks on that. And we did luck out timing wise with a very low bond rating interest rate. So we had good advice from our finance director on that one. We're saddened by the tension in our country and ask people to treat each other with respect during these unusual times that you've seen throughout our nation. And lastly, summer break is official here for our school kids. Congratulations to our local seniors, and our best to you in your future plans. And with that, Mr. Beitendijk, I will pass it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Beitendijk, could I ask the mayor a couple quick questions regarding what he just told us? Or should I say that for the end of the meeting?
Well, I'd like to move on, and okay. I don't know. Is it something you can ask him after the meeting or what have you? Or is it anything related to legislation that's...
No, it's nothing related to legislation.
All right, well, maybe that's the best.
Okay,
best time to ask about it in relation to the legislation involved, and then everyone will have an
thank you.
idea.
Mhm.
All right. We come to petitions, which there are none. How about communications from the public, the gatekeeper?
We have no one at this time.
All right.
I have asked in the comment section that anyone who would like to address, please type in the comments. We have 7 people watching, no comments as of yet.
All right. That brings us to committee reports, and we did have a finance committee meeting just before this council meeting. And Mr. Ansel, I invite you to weigh in on what took place.
Yes, I will be brief. We had a very productive and insightful meeting. We had 2 agenda items this evening. The first is a 2020 Community Development Block Grant Small Cities Program, of which they've provided additional funding to focus on public health and well-being, part because of the COVID-19 issue, and other to assist in the homeless, with the homeless, and lower income residents in need. And you'll be hearing more about that piece this evening as we have some pending legislation to at least request those additional funds and then allocate them appropriately upon receipt over the fiscal year 2021 and 2022. A very unique and innovative program that has been worked on very diligently by the Salvation Army, 180, the Housing Coalition, and the Wayne County Housing Authority. So you'll be hearing more about that. We appreciate everyone's input, especially Jonathan Millay for the very nice presentation that you put together preparing for this discussion. Then we also had a secondary item on the agenda, and it was a little more complex, and we won't have that piece this evening to discuss, but it's a new incentive. It's not new, but it's relatively low experience within the state, and it's called the tax incremental financing option. It kind of is a it's an addition to our enterprise zone, our tax abatement, primarily on commercial industrial, and also on our CRA program. And it focuses more on residential and commercial development, but the pending request, I believe, that we have in the formulation stage are focused more on residential development, whereas infrastructure improvements can be made within a development, allowing the developer and the homeowner to, the builder, the developer having lower upfront costs, the homeowner then having lower purchase price values, and over the period of a 20 to 30 year amortization, funds would be reimbursed based on the additional tax revenue generated from those investments. That's the concept summary. There's still a lot of definition. While there are some guidelines as outlined in the Ohio Revised Code, we'll need to have a consensus recommendation to present to council, and Laws and Ordinance Committee will be working through that process to establish the specific criteria that will complement the Ohio Revised Code for this economic development tool within our toolbox to use at some future date, hopefully sooner than later, because as we all are aware, residential housing, there is a strong demand, or there was pre-COVID, and we're anticipating hopefully that will return quickly. So thank you, other Finance Committee members, and all members of council participated in that discussion. And again, Jonathan and the administration for your preparation for that meeting. So we still have a lot of work to do on the TIF discussion, but the Community Development Block Grant will be proposed this evening for council review, discussion, and potentially voting. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the summary there, Mr. Ansel. No public hearings tonight, but on the 15th of June, there will be a public hearing on the budget, And I know that Mr. Paulo has it teed up to publish that as required. So thank you, Mr. Paulo. We have a busy legislative session tonight. One item unfinished business and 10 items of new business. So let's start out with the unfinished business, which is the, excuse me, the second reading of ordinance number 2020-17. I'm losing my voice. If you would, Mr. Paulo, please read that and I'll get a cup of water.
Ordinance number 2020-17. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Timothy Enterprises LLC and Caliber Holdings Corporation for community reinvestment area tax incentives and declaring an emergency.
And Mr. Ansel, I assume you're just going to keep this on second reading tonight?
I'm happy to do that, so I'll be brief. We have before us, and we had detailed discussion at our last session regarding a proposed $1.6 million facility on the 585 corridor that currently is generating about $3,600 of annual revenue, tax revenue. With the proposed 50% abatement, it would now generate for the next period $24,504. It does have job retention involved with it, but it is a great location for a Caliber collision facility located in a highly traveled corridor. The concerns that were discussed at our last sessions focused on really the need of necessity. And we talked a lot about the development and the value that this current employer has within the community. Nagy's Collision, now part of the Caliber Group, and this initiative being significant investment within our community, a premier facility. The real issue is, will this project proceed with or without the abatement? The developer, the property owner, did highlight that they were proceeding either way. Councilman Warden, I asked that question, which was a very relevant question. And we'll keep this on second reading this evening. And at our next session on the 15th, we'll be prepared to vote in terms of how we want to proceed with this particular investment. Thank you.
Okay, we'll consider ordinance number 2020-17 as having its second reading. We'll move on to item 7 of new business. First ordinance or piece of legislation, actually a resolution, is resolution number 2020-25. It's Mr. Ansel's annual tax budget. It's slated for 3 readings, and we will have 3 readings on it. Not to steal your thunders, Mr. Ansel, seeing we still have to have a public hearing on it. But before I get to you, I will ask Mr. Paulo to please read the title.
Resolution number 2020-25. A resolution providing for the annual tax budget for fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2021.
Mr. Ansel, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I will highlight that everyone is aware I'm a very patient person, so I have no problem reading this, leaving this on 3 readings. So it is something that we do every year at this time, and it does require a public meeting. But just for brevity introduction, this is our 2020 city tax budget. And Mr. Dordia and his staff have compiled numerous pages in terms of projection. This is our tax budget required by the Ohio Revised Code, and it's nothing more than our financial plan and projections of operations for the next calendar year. It identifies how much money we're expecting from local, state, and federal sources, the anticipated carryover fund balances, and how much is needed to carry out the governmental functions for the city of Wooster. This budget is then submitted to the County Budget Commission and used to fix property tax rates. So we do it every year. And again, the thoroughness and preparation is always impressive. I will highlight that this year we are projecting, or in 2020, we're projecting tax receipts to be 5% under projected budget, primarily because of the business disruptions within our community. We all can certainly recognize that. Several of our large employers have had shutdowns and are slowly calling their employees back to work. But then in 2021, we're projecting a return to normalcy and having a 5% increase. And we'll get it more into that at the end of the year when we do our final budget review and presentation. But I want to also highlight and reiterate that kudos to the city administration on their bond initiative and the refinancing of our debt that will generate, again, just to highlight, over $1.4 million of savings over the issuance of the funding. So very impressive. So guys, get in your slide rules and calculators and review the budget projections. And we'll have a public meeting next council session on the 15th. And the following meeting will have this for final review and approval by council.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ansel. Appreciate it. And I should also give a shout out as well to the city managers, because I know they spend a lot of time
Absolutely.
and they don't present a lot of fat when they finally get their figures into the finance department, which does a wonderful job year in and year out, and putting it in a semblance of order that even me with an 8th grade math skills can understand. So that's why there's the Bytendike section in the budget right there, Mr. Doherty. All right, that will now move on to resolution number 2020-26. It's a resolution will be presented by Mr. Bostancic. And I think on my ordinance or resolution, I think it's budgeted. So it wouldn't require 3 readings. Is that correct?
No, I don't think,
No.
on mine it's not. It's for a project next year.
Okay, well then it will require 3 readings. So my little B on my script is wrong, so it'll require 3 readings unless the rules are suspended. And before I get to you, Mr. Bostancic, I will once again look to Mr. Paulo to read the title.
Resolution number 2020-26, a resolution authorizing the Director of Administration to enter into a cooperative agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for resurfacing urban paving within the city of Worcester and declaring an emergency.
Well, and in my defense, and it is nothing that Ms. DiPaolo did. This is the one prepared by the state of Ohio, so it doesn't have all those niceties of 3 readings on it. So anyways, we'll consider it to be a 3 reading resolution. So Mr. Bostancic, take it away.
Okay, thank you. As stated, what we're seeking to do here is enter into a cooperative agreement with ODOT to certain sections of 2 state routes, which are in the city limits. The first section is Route 302 from Grant Street to Old Mansfield Road. And the second section is a small portion of Route 250, which will go to the front of the Highway Patrol. This is the much smaller section. And the beauty of this is that this is for a project, as we just stated, is hopefully going to commence in June of 2021. So it's not a budget item as yet. But the beauty of this is with this agreement, the state of Ohio will pick up 80% of the costs. And of course, at least 20% for the city, which is estimated at this time to be $160,000. And what I would like to do tonight is put this on third and final, help speed the project along. And this is something we need to get moving if we want to use these funds. Other than that, if there are any questions?
Well, I'll take that as a motion to suspend the rules. And if there's a second out there, I'd certainly entertain it.
Second.
David Sylvester.
That's why I saw Scott's hand go up first because he's right in the center of my screen. So sorry about that, Mr. Cavan, because I did hear your voice. So we'll consider Mr. Myers to have seconded it. And if you would call the roll on the motion to suspend the rules, I'd appreciate it, Mr. Paulo.
Bastancik,
Yes.
Myers, Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan.
Yes.
Mr. Myers, you kind of blocked out there. Was yours a yes or no vote?
That was yes.
Okay.
All right, the rules have been suspended. I look to you again, Mr. Bastancik.
Move to adopt.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Bastancik. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Warden. Now, Mr. Bastancik would like to have discussion, and I agree. But as a room killer, so seeing none,
Not a lot of discussion on a project that gets paid 80% by the state, I think.
yeah, well, it's always nice when we have these synergistic projects where they pick up the bulk of it. So, I know the administration does a fine job of ferreting all these things out for the city.
Mr. Bastancik? I was just going to touch base with Mr. Denning since we have him here this evening. And is this project look consistent with your plans, Mr. Denning? You're
Kurt,
currently muted.
you're muted. Kurt, you're muted. There
Sorry
we go.
about that. This is a Roger project, so we'll let him intervene with this here. But yeah, it's in line with what our plans would be. But this is a Roger project.
Okay. I have no further questions, Mr. Bastancik.
I think
And Roger's good with it as long as ODOT wants to pay 80% of it.
That's what I suspected he would say, yes.
Oh, you're the phone number, huh, Mr. Bastancik?
Nope, Kobalarczyk.
Or Mr. Kobalarczyk, I'm sorry. I don't see your face. All I see is a phone number and a image icon of a phone.
Wasn't that due to the overwhelming write-in we got after the last meeting?
Oh, shoot.
I didn't catch that.
Don't worry about it.
So
Okay.
anything else? Seeing none, would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt there, Ms. DiPaolo?
Bastancik, Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan.
Yes.
Okay, resolution number 2020-26 passes. We'll turn our attention to ordinance number 2020-18. And there are some guests here who will be willing to speak on this. It's presented by Mr. Ansel, slated for 3 readings, and I'll let you introduce the guests there, Mr. Ansel. But before I turn it over to you, I'll have Ms. DiPaolo read the title of the ordinance.
Ordinance number 2020-18. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Ray and Associates, Inc. and Ray Real Estate Ltd. for community reinvestment area tax incentives and declaring an emergency.
Okay, Mr. Ansel, the floor is yours.
Well, unfortunately, I can't see who is attending as our guests on this piece of legislation this evening. I know Mr. Gorman, Attorney Gorman, was part of our last meeting, but I don't have everyone's screenshots on my phone. Can you assist?
Well, I know
I-
Mr. McCarthy's here.
And Mr. Gorman is here also.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
What an exciting project initiative that we have before us this evening. And it has so many positive elements. It's really hard to summarize, but I will be brief. Ray and Associates, 21 plus person employer in our city, and their real estate, Ray Real Estate Holdings, their affiliated land holding company, have applied for a 12-year, 50% abatement in the heart of our CRA for a planned investment of $3.5 to $4.5 million in the former dilapidated, blighted Horn nursing home property. This project will create a beautiful, architectural wonder, 2-story, 16,100 square foot office building, and retain the firm's expanded 21 person professional workforce in our downtown. They originally approached the city of Wooster and Wooster Growth to inquire about the Horn Nursing Home, as it was owned by our local community nonprofit Community Improvements Corporation, and did have several other options outside of the city. So they're wanting to stay within the city. Their employees like being in the downtown area. It was vital and required that we proceed with some type of incentive to retain them, especially with the dollars involved with this development. They did collaborate, as we are all aware, with a recently approved CRA, an independent CRA, with Weaver Custom Homes for adjacent townhouses. So while they had a collaborative and mutual direction for the vacated property, they are two independent CRAs, and we approved that, the Weaver Construction, in our last session. But with the working with the city and the developers and the Worcester Growth and the Wayne County Community Improvement Corporation, an agreement was reached where they acquired the properties, they demolished the abandoned property, and issued a formal request for redevelopment with the joint application with Weaver Custom Homes, as I've highlighted. This project has significant justification and benefits. It does retain jobs in the city and our downtown. It reinvests in the former Horn nursing home site and replaces the lost real estate tax revenues, higher even under the proposed abatement than it was originally with the Horn nursing home. And it was far, far greater, and I'll share those numbers momentarily, than the vacated property that we had available. So it does coincide with the city's comprehensive plan and the Worcester Chamber of Commerce and Main Street, and it does retain jobs in our downtown. It is an investment of $217 to $280 per square foot. And again, that just reinforces the how nice this property is going to be in our downtown. The tax obligation for the vacated lot was $10,353 annually. After the project is complete on their portion of the development, it'll be between $59,993 annually to $74,175. And of course, that is contingent upon the final cost of the project after the build is complete. So it's a win-win-win for all parties involved, for our downtown, for our CIC and Worcester Growth Corporation, who did make a speculative investment to acquire that property and make that property developable. So, and also Ray and Associates to have some type of return on this significant investment over the next 12 years. So I am going to recommend that we fast track this. The weather is good. Everyone is motivated. This does have the approval of Wooster Growth Corporation. We had a similar meeting last week and it was approved unanimously, but certainly I'll be requesting the council reiterate how much we appreciate this initiative on a valued investor and employer within our community. We fast track this evening. So that being noted, I would motion to suspend the rules and move ordinance 2020-18 to third and final reading this evening.
Okay, Mr. Ansel has moved to suspend the rules on ordinance number 2020-18. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Cavan. Would you please call the roll, Mr. Paulo, on the motion to suspend the rules?
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan,
Yes.
Bastancik.
Yes.
Okay, the rules are suspended. Mr. Ansel, I look to you again for a motion.
I would motion to adopt, Mr. President.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Ansel. Is there a second?
Second. Myers.
Second by Mr. Cavan. I not only heard you, I saw your hand this time, Mr. Cavan. So anyways, now we can have discussion. And I should point out, I know that Ray and Associates had to kind of revise their application because after the passage of the school levy, I know their income tax or property tax based on this property went up $6,000. So you can tell that that levy certainly helped the school system here in Worcester. So, Mr. Ansel, you want to lead the discussion?
Yes, I would open the floor for any council input prior to vote.
Mr. Ansel, this is Mr. Myers. I just want to say, I think it's a really nice looking building. It fits very well with the architecture of the downtown.
You're getting clever there, Mr. Myers, with it in your background.
Scott, that's pretty catchy. I like that with the background.
Yeah, I'm standing, I think, in front of the Mr. Gorman's law firm, kind of looking across probably.
Mr. Cavan, did you
looks
want to
like
make
it.
a comment?
Yes, I do applaud that as a significant investment in our downtown. I think it's really going to stand out, and that's the type of thing that we envisioned when we enacted a lot of the CRA abatements. The other question I would have is what is intended to be done with the existing building that they're in just up the street?
The current building that we have, we plan on selling that building. So we don't look to want to lease it. We have a couple interested parties now who we're having conversations with. If those don't go anywhere, we will basically put it up for sale.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. McCarthy, as I was reading through the proposal, I think it stated that there were, correct me if I'm wrong, but 31 employees that would be going into the new location. Is that correct?
I believe we're bringing over 21, but we're planning on having, bringing over a lot more. There's going to be some hiring. There's going to be a merger with another firm. So we plan on having a lot more than what we have at this point.
Great. What is the approximate capacity that you could fit in the new structure?
We're setting it up to be able to have parking places for 70. And at this point, we are trying to make sure we have excess capacity for growth. But at the goal ends up being is we want to be able to get 40 people in there pretty quick.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This, excuse me, this is Bill Bastanzik. Would this construction start this year?
The goal is that we would want to start digging in the dirt probably sometime mid-July.
Thank you. What would the completion be before the winter, do you think, or is it going to extend into the spring? Or
It sounds to me, based on the conversation with the construction contractor, we're hoping that it'll be done mid-July of 2021.
Thank you.
I would just
Any other
like,
comments, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. Gorman, please?
Mr. Ansel, I'd just like to thank the city administration. They've been very supportive of us throughout this process. We've been probably close to a year-long endeavor, and the mayor, Jonathan, the city, and Worcester Growth have all been very, very supportive, creative, and we're very excited about the project. I think it'll be a real cornerstone for decades to come in the downtown area. And I think it's exactly what the CRA is made for.
And I would just like to thank everybody, the collaboration between Worcester Growth and the city. Keep in mind that seems like it was a long time ago, but Ray and Associates considered actually bidding on that property when it had gone up for auction. And then we, based on everything with that piece of property and the fact that, you know, there was no, at that point, we weren't aware of the CRA capability, that we decided not even to bid on the property. So between Worcester Growth and the collaboration with the city, if it wasn't for them, we would not actually be building on that property.
I'd sure like to echo our thanks to Ray and Associates and then Critchfield Law Firm and helping bring this all together. And this is a perfect project as far as the administration is concerned. And yeah, Mr. Cavan, you're absolutely correct. This is a perfect way to utilize CRA to make things happen in your downtowns.
I'll close by complimenting everyone for the effective collaboration and vision. It's a marvelous, marvelous outcome for a formerly blighted property. But again, it's a great location and it's going to be a magnificent building. Again, I highlight that the architectural design and the quality, it's premier, it's world-class. And thank you, Ray and Associates, for your commitment to the city of Worcester, and also for the administration and Worcester Growth Corporation and the CIC and C&J, Critchfield and Johnson, for working so diligently to make sure that this became a reality. And it's going to be all very much worth it. It's going to be a premier facility in our wonderful downtown. And these things don't happen. It's a casebook study of how working together and having visions and cooperation and support can all be very successful. And we're so fortunate to have that within our city. So congratulations. Thank you again on behalf of Worcester City Council and the city administration, Ray and Associate, for your commitment and your vision in our downtown. So that being noted, any other comments?
You'll turn it back over to me?
Yes. Please, Mr. President.
Okay. And, you know, obviously a significant investment of money, and appreciate that. You know, we even are there even more money's going into the coffers because the other place wasn't paying any property tax. So, you know, so this is a lot more than what we were even getting before. So we appreciate the investment in the city of Worcester. So thank you all. So,
You know, Mr. President, if I could,
yes.
Before we end, I just want to highlight what Mr. Ansel said. I know you made reference to it as well, but I've been asked a lot of questions about the Horn Nursing Home property over the last time period, and I know you know, there was a party interested in it and it didn't work out a while back. And I just want to thank the applicant here, that Ray and Associates and everyone involved, because I had read over the application and they could have gone anywhere outside the city, and it probably would have been easier administratively than trying to shoehorn their plans into the old Horn Nursing Home facility. So I just wanted to make it known that a lot of residents have asked me over the last months and before this project even came to light and surfaced, And I just want to thank everyone for working to make it happen, and just highlight the fact that a lot of people worked very hard and there were other options on the table, but we're so glad you went into that parcel and to put your facility there. Thank you.
Mr. Paulo, would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt ordinance number 2020-18?
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan,
Yes.
and Bastancik.
Yes.
I'm pleased to announce that ordinance number 2020-18 passes.
Thank you
Good
very
luck
much.
with the project,
Thank you.
Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you.
You.
Okay, after that excitement, now to resolution number 2020-27. This will be presented by Mr. Bastancik, and this is budgeted. So it will not require 3 readings. Before I get to you, Mr. Bastancik, I will turn to Ms. DiPaolo and ask her once again to read yet another piece of legislation.
Resolution number 2020-27, a resolution authorizing the Director of Administration to advertise according to law and enter into a contract with the lowest and best bidder to extend Daisy Way from Old Airport Road to the existing Daisy Way and declaring an emergency.
Okay, Mr. Bastancik, the floor is yours. And before I turn it over, Mr. McCarthy, you're more than welcome to participate and listen in the rest of this meeting, but if you decide to go elsewhere, you won't hurt anyone's feelings, okay?
Sitting on many meetings, I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, and if Mr. Gorman probably had the good sense to duck out already.
That's because I was paying him.
Yeah, okay.
By the hour.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Bastancik, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Administration is ready to go to bid for a project that I know has been discussed for a long period in town, and that was in extending Old Airport Road out to alleviate traffic issues at the Old Airport Road and 585. We're ready to go. This is a project. It's a $1 million project. We got $250,000 from the state, another $200,000 from another entity, and $161,000 in assessment. So a lot of it will be picked up by other entities as well. This is ready to go except for one small matter. And if you remember 2 meetings ago, I held up a map showing where they wanted to have needed a right of way to make a curve a little easier and better looking on the extension. And the only thing we're waiting for right now is the finalization of obtaining the necessary right of way. And once Roger gets that, the bids will go out. So there's just one small thing to go yet. I don't anticipate there's going to be any problem because I know both the landowner and the city are in agreement on everything. So it's just a matter of finishing everything up. But great project, and I think it's been needed for a long time. And anybody has any questions? I think Roger's still on the phone, but I'm ready to go to vote on it.
Seeing none and not seeing Roger, I'm going to assume you've got a motion for us.
I've still got the phone icon on, so he's there somewhere, I think.
Well, I know I got the phone icon, but I don't see him personally or his
He's
physical
here.
being.
He's here.
Okay, I move for adoption.
Okay, motion to adopt by Mr. Bastancik. Is there a second?
David Silvestri will second.
Second by Mr. Silvestri. Any further discussion? Seeing none, would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt, Ms. DiPaolo?
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan,
Yes.
Bastancik,
Yes.
and Myers.
Yes.
Okay, resolution number 2020-27 passes. We'll turn to resolution number 2020-28. It'll be presented by Mr. Silvestri. It is budgeted, so will not require suspension of the rules, but it does require me to turn to Ms. DiPaolo and ask her to read the resolution.
Resolution number 2020-28, a resolution authorizing the Director of Administration to advertise according to law and enter into a contract with the lowest and best bidder for the Lincoln Street Waterline Replacement Project and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Silvestri, I turn the floor over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. So what we have is a piece of legislation here for the replacement of the water line on Lincoln Street, as you heard. We're going to advertise, we're going to authorize our Director of Administration to advertise that project out. It's going to run from Nold Avenue to University Street. And we're going to replace about 2,800 linear feet of 6-inch cast iron water line. With a history of breaks, we're going to upgrade that to an 8-inch ductile iron pipe, and it's going to replace also 62 water services along that stretch. That's almost the full extent of all of Lincoln Street. One problem, Roger, since you're still on the line here, not problem, one question, I should say. I just had a question here. Is it also going to include that small segment north of University or no?
No, just the university.
Okay, so up to University Street. And in closing, Roger, thank you for you and your staff doing all of the design, construction admin duties and inspection in-house to save the taxpayers money on this replacement. So I appreciate it. It does not require suspension of the rules. So since it is budgeted, I would move for adoption.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Silvestri. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Warden. Any further discussion?
I'd just like to ask, I assume it's not the case because I didn't read it in the legislation, but are there any assessments that the residents will be facing to reconnect to the water?
No,
that's
not.
a good question. I guess I didn't explicitly state this, but of the $600,000 cost, $300,000 is community development block grant monies, and the other $300,000 does come out of the water fund. So, yep.
Thank you.
Sure. I'm sure the residents are grateful for that as well.
For sure, yes.
So.
And then I guess I just to piggyback on that first question, I know Lincoln is, it's in my neighborhood and it's sort of one of the less improved streets over here. Will there be complete repaving of the street or resurfacing of the street after the project is completed?
It's on the list possibly for next year. I don't know what the budget's going to look like, but not this year.
Okay.
Thank you, Roger.
Yep.
Anything else? Hearing none and seeing no one waving their hand, I would turn to Ms. DiPaolo and ask her to call the roll on the motion to adopt.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan,
Yes.
Bastancik,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
and Sanders.
Yes.
Resolution number 2020-28 passes. Turning now to resolution number 2020-29. This is slated for 3 readings and will be presented by Mr. Ansel. And I know that there are folks here with regard to this resolution, which Mr. Ansel, you probably can't see, and we'll try to introduce them for you after I turn it over to you, if that's all right.
Yes, please.
All right. So before we get to you again, please, Ms. DiPaolo, read the title.
Resolution number 2020-29. A resolution authorizing the mayor to submit an application to the State of Ohio Development Services Agency for a small cities community development block grant, to accept such monies if awarded, to execute any necessary documents in connection therewith, and declaring an emergency.
All right, Mr. Ansel, the floor is yours, but I hope I get everyone here. I know that Krista Kidney's here. Major Madeline Dwyer is here. Jamie Parsons is here. Mr. Stuart Fitzgibbons is here. Are you here on this one, Mr. Fitzgibbons?
No, I'm here for the charter review.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. And am I missing anyone else? I can't get everyone in the same
Is
screen.
Stan Pop still there, Mike?
Who?
Stan Pop, he was at the earlier meeting.
Yeah, no, I don't see him. So I think I got everyone, Ms. Parsons, Major Dwyer, and Ms. Kidney here.
And Mr. Monet's there also.
Yeah, but he's part of the administration.
He's also part of the Housing Coalition.
Yeah, I get it. I get
Okay.
it. So, Mr. Ansel, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you very much. We have a really unique window of opportunity, whereas we are able to utilize CDBG funding, Community Development Block Grant funding. There's a biannual allocation grant program. We've been very successful in the past, maxing out our dollars for this program. And normally we're restricted to investing those dollars to infrastructure and improvement, whereas out of the $150,000 that we're eligible to secure, we would only be able to invest $22,500 toward public service items. Well, this year they're waiving that limitation in the grant cycle based on the greater need to support community services in the wake of COVID-19. However, we are anticipating in the future to this return to a 85% allocation of CDBG funding for infrastructure as it has been in the past. But that being noted, there's two opportunities. One is an existing opportunity that we channel our maximum amount of allowable dollars to the Viola Startzman Clinic as we recognize the important contribution that they make within our city. And we're recommending now, based on the additional allowances, to increase that to $50,000. So in essence, doubling the amount for the Viola Startzman Clinic. But we're also looking at a new program that has been a collaboration between the Salvation Army 180, the Wayne Housing Coalition, whereas we would expand services, community support services to lower income residents within our city in a project initiative called The Living Room, whereas the Salvation Army would host an extended operating hour within the middle of the day to support those in need and to service bathing, personal hygiene, personal development, washing clothes, drying of clothes, and provide valuable and needed services to those in need. And it has been a very deliberate review process, whereas the team, the coalition, has worked together to define and staff and provide this support service in our downtown area. And with these dollars available, we have to authorize the city to proceed in the application grant process and then earmark those funds, if awarded, to the Viola Startzman Clinic, as well as the Salvation Army Living Room Initiative. There are some comparative programs that have been very successful. One that was shared with our committee this evening is in Newark, Ohio, and the team went down and investigated their program, and it's a resounding success. And I will highlight this. This is not only a city financed initiative, And this really reiterates the importance of the concept, because the Wayne County Commissioners have also committed $20,000 annually for the next 3 years to fund this initiative, as well as a $15,000 gift by the Wayne County Community Foundation. Then there's up to another $43,000 of funding from the Salvation Army. They're committing to this project over a 3-year period. Plus, they're anticipating over $5,000 of local community donations and support based on the track record of the residents of Worcester supporting these programs. I am going to leave this on first reading this evening to allow council, because we just had the presentation prior to our meeting on first reading. However, please, other council members, dive in and do your research and forward any questions you might have to the participants that has joined our committee meeting as well as our council session this evening, because there is a deadline for applications of June 19th. So we will have to decide at our next council session, June 15th, whether we're going to proceed with this. But it is a very, very important consideration, much needed within our community. And it's really a godsend that we have this opportunity to reallocate funds that would normally be focused and directed to infrastructure improvements. But in our discussion in our committee meeting, we did notate that over the next 2 years, we have ample funds within our budget to support the targeted and required infrastructure improvements. So this is a community improvement initiative, one of a long-running successful program and one of a new innovative program. They've been grouped together. Hopefully we can get this resolved during the next session. So that being noted, I'm keeping this on first reading, but I would open the floor up to council for any comments this evening to consider.
John, this is.
Yes, Mr. Bostancic, please.
Yes. I think this is a great piece of legislation. I'd be ready to vote yes on it tonight. We all know, going to two very good organizations that really provide a big need. It's amazing the number of people in Worcester that are basically barely making it. And a lot of times, when it comes to healthcare, especially, we're talking about the $50,000 grant to the Wireless Startsman. There's some people that make a little bit too much more money to get on Medicaid, and you get people, and then there's a lot of people who just can't afford even to get on the ACA, and they end up going to the clinic. And then as far as the Salvation Army plan, Major Dreyer did take me through and showed me what was going to be used down there at the Salvation Army. I think they've been working on this for quite a while, and I think it's going to be, this is another thing that's going to help to fill a great need. I mean, a lot of people, one of the big things I get when I'm about town is people are concerned about the number of people that just hang out, the homeless or housing, what they call couch surfers, or hanging out downtown or in the library or this, that, and the other thing. And this is something that will help alleviate that. It's not going to completely solve the problem, but it would give them somewhere to go in the middle of the afternoon, as well as being exposed to, there would be a full-time, from what I understand, a full-time social worker Monday through Friday at the Salvation Army as well. So it's kind of a twofer in my view. And I don't want to prolong this, but I think it's one of the best pieces of legislation I think I've seen come around for a while. And I really like this. Okay, good. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Bostancic. Well, I will defer. I just wanted to give council ample consideration. I too support this. I know a lot of hard work has went into the planning and the forecasting phase. And we have a wonderful facility with the Salvation Army. And most of the costs, as you've highlighted, Mr. Bostancic, is staffing costs and social worker costs to support the monitoring and engagement with those in need throughout the day. So we're wonderful to have a group that has taken this and pursued it collectively. And we have a wonderful facility located in strategic proximity to those in need. And then to have this opportunity, this window of opportunity to use the community development block grant funding that we've been very successful receiving. You're right. It's almost like the perfect situation where all this came together. The timing has been ideal. So I will, based on input from other council members, we can move this along, or we can defer it for one more reading and still be able to hit the deadline. So any other council feedback before making that call?
I'd be willing to vote for it this evening, Mr. Ansel.
Thank you, Ms. Warden.
Mr.
Any
Ansel,
other?
this is Mr. Myers. I would hate to see Chris to have to sit through another one of these long meetings. I would be willing to support it this evening.
Mr. Ansel, David Silvestri here.
Yes, Silvestri, please.
Also, speaking of the Wayne County Housing Coalition, I want to thank Krista Kidney for providing that letter that she provided that came in our council packets. I just felt like it was important to note that, you know, the Salvation Army as kind of, they get credited with the plan as well. They should, all that they're putting into this. And then as you highlighted, we have a rare opportunity to use these CDBG funds as a springboard to get this project started, to get it going. And then just the foresight and the long-term vision of how we're going to continue to fund it. I mean, I think the Salvation Army has the most at stake here with the long-term funding. And I appreciated the letter that was provided by the Wayne County Housing Coalition talking about the overwhelming support that this has received. So I hope it's a step in a good direction. I know there's a need in our downtown. We've talked a lot about what we could do to provide some facilities for things like you know, basic hygiene, basic necessary functions, and what an opportunity that these funds this year can be used for community services. So I think it's a great project. It's a great example of what happens when the right parties come to the table and everybody pitches in and comes up with ideas. And I'm excited to see what this experiment yields.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Question.
Yes, please.
At this point, we're looking at funding for the next 2 years based on this CBDG money. The question is, what happens in year 3 if that money doesn't come forward? What's the plan in terms of a funding model to allow this to continue?
That's a good question. We talked about that in our committee session. This is a funding experiment. And at that point in time, it will have to be decided whether it is a program that has been successful. And one of the things they will be presenting to council, and we, you know, as we do the neuter and spay cat program, we see how many are, you know, serviced annually through the program. We would expect to have a report from this coalition in terms of the success and ongoing private support, and not all public support or the biggest funder, because again, the county commissioners are on the hook for 3 years. We're on the hook for, not the hook, that's a bad analogy, but we've committed for a 2-year period. Based on the success, at that point in time, it would either have to be considered for some type of city finance funding through our general fund allocation, future CDBG to the level that we're allowed to contribute at the max level. But that's a valid question, Councilman Sanders. That is an unknown. If at the end of 2 years, this is overwhelmingly successful, as they talked about the model in Newark, and we heard that that's been very, very successful, there is no city funding being allocated toward that operation. And we heard that loud and clear at our committee session. So yeah, this is seed money. And if there is a value, that's something that can be considered in 2 years. If it's not as successful as we hope it to be, that is going to be a tough decision to make in terms of what future direction the program will have to take if it doesn't have the funding vehicle, because we're going to be through this program. It's not coming out of our general fund or the taxpayers' funds right now. This is, allocated grant money that we get, may not be sustainable in the future.
Mr. Ansel, if I might be able to jump in.
Please.
Bob Brenneman. The funding and budget that was presented from the Salvation Army is, if all things fall into place correctly, with this funding level, we think they can get 3 years potentially out of this funding pool. So even though it's just a 2-year CDBG commitment, we believe that that third year with good planning and usage of funds, that they'll be able to get at least a third year out of that. And then by the fourth year, we'll have to determine if that deserves further funding at that point.
Thank you for that clarification, Mayor Brenneman. And you're right. I'm just looking at the numbers right now with our allocation, and based on the cost projections of being 75, 78, 80,000 over the next 3 years. If you look at the funds that they'll have out of the blocks, it'll be over $200,000, and that should be able to sustain them for a 3-year operating period. Very important point. Thank you for that. Well, any other comments?
I would
That
just
being
wrap up,
noted-
Mr. Ansel. David
yes,
Silvestri here. While that's a valid concern and we don't know the future, all we can do is plan and execute and do our best to adapt. I think, Councilman Sanders brings up a valid point, but by the same token, I say nothing ventured, nothing gained. And now's the time to use this opportunity for the CDBG monies. Usually like you noted, 85% has to go to infrastructure. The fact that we can use this for community services at this juncture, I think we should take the opportunity. And
I think it would be a much more difficult decision without that, Councilman Silvestri.
Absolutely.
Very good point.
Absolutely.
You know what? Based on the feedback, let's just go with this evening. I'm going to make the motion to suspend the rules and move resolution 2020-29 to third and final reading this evening.
All right, motion by
Seconded.
Mr. Ansel to suspend the rules. Is there a second?
Seconded by Mr. Myers.
Second by Mr. Myers to suspend the rules. Mr. Paulo, if you would, please call the roll on the motion to suspend the rules.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan,
Yes.
Costancic,
Your mute's on, Mr. Bostancic.
I'm sorry, yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri.
Yes.
Okay, the motion to suspend the rules passes. Do you have another motion for us, Mr. Ansel?
Motion to adopt, Mr. President.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Ansel, and the second, who seconded?
Okay. Bill
Mr.
Bostancic.
Bostancic. Any further discussion, although we've discussed this in a committee meeting and just had a fairly rigorous discussion prior to the motion to adopt?
My only concern is that it's not going to be administratively heavy and provide salaries for folks and not provide service. It doesn't sound that way to me, but that's my only hesitation.
Well, like other things, we can review it every year to see where it's at, where the money's going for, how many people are serviced, what kind of services are provided. As Mr. Ansel likes to say, there are some matrices out there that we can measure whether or not it's top heavy or not.
Right. For me, it's just at this point, we're not able to kick the tires, anything like that. We're just getting in and we're taking off. I mean, it sounds like it's very much needed. I know it is.
Yeah. Well, the good news isn't directly out of our public coffers. I mean, it's a return of state money, and it really doesn't go through some of this doesn't go through for infrastructure anyway. So, different, it's new times, a new normal. People need help, and this certainly has all the earmarks of helping people that are sorely in need of this type
Don't get me wrong. I'm on board. I'm on board.
Okay.
If it's coming out of my infrastructure committee too, and I'm still voting for it, so.
Well, and the only other suggestion is we got a couple of years to pressure the legislature to allow them to loosen some of the funding requirements, to maybe allow more social service type spending out of the community development block grant funds. So,
along those
Mr.
lines,
Biden, I would suggest, I think we've probably spent more money on lesser causes in the past out of our general fund budget. So I think let's give this thing a start. Let's see how it goes. If it's successful as we suspect it will be, I'm sure we'll be able to find the funding that's necessary to keep going.
I hope it is successful. I very much do.
Well, I will highlight, and thank you for that feedback. I will, accountability is the key. And Madeline and Krista, you heard that. So the opportunity to generate success through this program and then document and, highlight the impact that this has had is going to be an opportunity for you to validate how this investment is generating return for those in needs and the citizens of Worcester. And I think you do a very good job of that. So you heard that loud and clear. The council is going to be watching and monitoring the impact of this program. And hopefully it resonates through the downtown merchants and it relieves some of the loitering and issues that have been, happening, and the feedback that we've received from the store owners. And more importantly, provide the service needed for those that don't have the resources to really improve their environment. So great initiative, great concept. And again, the accountability and the proof will be next year, the following year, seeing the statistical results in terms of those being served and the impact that this is having on our community. So good luck, Godspeed, and it sounds like this is going to be approved. So with that, we can go ahead and proceed.
All right, Mr. Paulo, if you would, please call the roll on the motion to adopt resolution number 2020-29.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan,
Yes.
Bostancic,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
and Silvestri.
Yes.
Resolution number 2020-29 passes. Good luck to everyone. And as I told Mr. McCarthy, don't feel that you have to stick around for the remainder of the meeting, unlike poor Mr. Fitzgibbons, who is patiently waiting for us to get down to the I think the last provision or last piece of legislation on the agenda. And we appreciate your patience there. And thank you for attending our meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. First reading of resolution number 2020-30. He'll be presented by Ms. Warden. It is budgeted. And before we get to you, Ms. Warden, I will ask once again for Ms. DiPaolo to please read the piece of legislation.
Resolution number 2020-30. A resolution authorizing the Director of Administration to advertise according to law and enter into a contract with the lowest and best bidder for replacement and upgrading of the Freelander Park primary electrical service and transformers and declaring an emergency.
Ms. Warden, the floor is yours.
Thank you. This is a resolution that authorizes the city to receive bids to upgrade and replace the overhead electrical service and transformers that are located at Freelander Park. The existing system is reportedly outdated and has been, excuse me, deteriorating, causing repeated outages and some safety hazards. The upgraded system will be located underground, which eliminates overhead hazards and any potential for downlines along the property of the park there. It is a budgeted item, as President Bytendike said, and it's estimated to cost approximately $220,000. I spoke with Mr. Denning, or messaged Mr. Denning today, and he stated that the work is projected to take place sometime this fall after the end of the 2020 pool season, so as to not disrupt any outdoor time that people can spend in the park. And he is also with us this evening if anyone has any questions. Appears that there are no questions, so I move to adopt.
Motion to adopt by Ms. Warden.
I'll
Is
second.
there a second?
I'll second. No, Mr.
Second by Mr. Bostancic. Any further discussion? See that Mr. Denning took his microphone off the mute, so.
Mr. President, David Silvestri here.
Yes.
I just one question I did have when I was reading through. And so I guess what I wanted to ask is, we're going from overhead service and transformers to underground service and transformers. I mean, obviously that sounds a lot nicer. I was just kind of curious as to what all was involved. I know, there's probably a little bit of a price that we pay for that. But maybe he could speak, maybe Mr. Denning could speak to how much nicer that'll make it for our residents.
Well, I'm also fortunate enough to have Andrew Guidetti here, who is our electrician for the city. So he's probably going to be able to explain that just a little bit more. But I know that it's high voltage of 3-phase electricity. So we're not talking like a residential type service because of the pool pumps and stuff and such there. So Andrew, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, other than the aesthetics of it is much more pleasing. You won't have the overhead poles that are blocking. You won't have the overhead lines running through trees with the potential of the trees coming down on the lines.
Okay. Have there been a number of outages there as well?
Yes. In
Okay.
the past 6 years, we've had 7 outages.
Okay, wow. Okay, so this is just in the area around the structure there, or what all does this cover?
This is the entire park.
Oh, wow, okay. Okay. Great, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. Seeing nothing else, could I ask you please, Mr. Paulo, to please call the roll on the motion to adopt?
Ansel,
Yes.
Bostancic,
Yes.
Cavan,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
and Warden.
Yes.
Resolution number 2020-30 passes. I know they are nowhere near the pool, but somehow overhead transformers and pool just does not sound like a good combination. So that brings us to resolution number 2020-31. Again, it'll be presented by Ms. Warden, and it is also a budgeted matter. Before I get to you, Ms. Warden, I will ask Mr. Paulo to please read the title.
Resolution number 2020-31. A resolution authorizing the Director of Administration to advertise according to law and enter into a contract with the lowest and best bidder for replacement of the Freelander Chalet roof and declaring an emergency.
Ms. Warden, the floor is yours again.
Thank you. So once again, we are talking about updates at Freelander Park. This particular resolution addresses the replacement of the chalet's roof. So as we all know, the chalet recently received an interior makeover, but much of the exterior remained unchanged. One part of that is the roof, which is 20 years old, and that's approximately the standard useful life of an asphalt shingle. So by not replacing the chalet roof, we risk structural or interior damage to our newly remodeled chalet, which is certainly something we'd like to avoid. The replacement is a fully funded capital expense in the city's 2020 budget, and it is expected to cost approximately $85,000. In addition to a new standing seam roof, which I think will look really slick on the chalet, kind of update the look a little bit. But there will also be insulation board installed, which will improve the chalet's energy efficiency and also lower heating and cooling costs for the city at that particular facility. And again, I asked Mr. Denning when this project was projected to take place, and he said sometime after the end of the 2020 pool season. So again, I would ask you to direct your questions to Mr. Denning.
See, you can't get out of it easy here, Denning.
That's okay.
I just have a quick one. Mr. Denning, I'm just curious, what's the expected life of a steel roof? I know they're much greater than asphalt, but do they have a range on those?
Yeah, I would say that, I think the manufacturer warranty on most of those products, and Mr. Sanders could probably verify this a little bit closer, but usually 30 years on the steel's type metal roof. Is that correct, Mr. Sanders?
Yeah, it is. I mean, your useful life on roofs that we've got in the field right now, I mean, are up to 50 years. So this is a good investment for us.
Thank you.
One thing I didn't ask earlier, Mr. Denning, is there, and this is just purely aesthetic, but is there a color selected yet? Just out of curiosity.
We were looking at a dark color, so that would probably either be a black or antique bronze in color.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Denning, you found a roof that's going to probably outlast me.
Well, it was interesting when we started doing the renovations there. We knew they had a couple leaks in the asphalt shingles, and we repaired those. The shingles were put in with staples, and so the staples actually weren't penetrated far enough into the tongue and groove roof decking, which is I found out later this. Earlier this year during a snowstorm, I went up there and looked at to make sure everything was heating well, and I noticed there was no snow on the roof, and I'm like, there's no insulation here. So we were like, yeah, we need to do something about that, and so we're investing quite a bit of money, but we'll return that investment pretty quick with the heat and electric loss and the heating and cooling.
Well, Mr. Denning, David Silvestri here, if I can just piggyback on that. It's nice to know that our energy is going to go more toward heating that building instead of just melting the snow on the roof. But I was curious, the scientist in me couldn't help but ask while you're here, do you know what that current R value is? I know it would take it up to 30 with the additional insulation.
My guess would be under 2.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well done. And hope we can pick the right color. I was a little curious about that as well. So we'll trust you on that. Thanks so much.
There's nothing further. I move to adopt.
Okay, motion to adopt by Ms. Warden. Is there a second?
David Silvestri will second.
Mr. Silvestri seconds the motion to adopt. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Paulo, would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt?
Costancic,
Yes.
Cavan,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel.
Yes.
Resolution number 2020-31 passes. It'll be nice to see a new roof, and the city has done a great job in rehabbing a building that is well into its 60th year. So it's nice that we do a good job of preserving not only our buildings, but I know all our other equipment here in the city. So thank you, Mr. Denning and Mr. Guidetti for attending tonight. That brings us to our penultimate piece of legislation. Resolution number 2020-32 will be presented by Mr. Ansel. It is slated for 3 readings. Mr. Paulo, would you please read the title?
Resolution number 2020-32. A resolution requesting that the Ohio Development Services Agency amend Wayne County's Enterprise Zone number 115C and declaring an emergency.
And Mr. Ansel, the floor is yours, sir.
Yes, this is more of an administrative initiative. This resolution is required, as was highlighted, to support the Wayne County Enterprise Zone 115C, which was the certified Angus beef enterprise zone for their warehouse and print shop expansion that we approved a few meetings ago. It was ordinance 2020-10. So that being noted, state law prohibits municipalities from amending their enterprise zone boundaries. We are constrained and have limitation, while the county enterprise zones may be recertified at any time. So since we annexed that land into the city, prior to that was in the county, they have kind of territorial approval for enterprise zones. But because we annexed this into the city, it does require this formal resolution presented to the county to officially include them into the rural enterprise zone program. This isn't going to be an issue per county government request. Only the certified Angus beef property at this point in time, parcel 73-00011.001 is being included. So as we would have future expansion into that parcel, we would have the same type of housekeeping or administrative function for county recertification and approval. It's pretty self-explanatory. It just limits our ability without county approvals in the future, but again, not anticipating any, because that is a contiguous parcel within the city of Worcester. So it was a great annexation, but now we just have another hurdle to go over as we proceed in the expansion north on the city's northernmost corridor. So pretty self-explanatory, not controversial at all. There's no monies involved. It's really a non-budgeted item because there's no financial impact with this. It's just getting the county's approval. So with that, I would motion to suspend the rules of council and move resolution 2020-32 to third and final reading this evening.
All right, Mr. Ansel's moved to suspend the rules for resolution number 2020-32. Is there a second?
David Silvestri,
Arnold,
second.
All right, Mr. Silvestri seconded the suspension of the rules. If you would, please, Mr. Paulo, call the roll on the motion to suspend the rules.
Cavan,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden.
Ms.
Jen,
Warden, you have your microphone.
you're muted.
Sorry, yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Bostancic.
Yes.
Okay, the rules have been suspended. Do you have a motion for us, Mr.
Motion to adopt, Mr. President.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Ansel. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Bostancic, I saw you first with your hand up and heard your voice. Any further discussion? Pretty straightforward. It's just to get in compliance with requirements and regulations with regard to the enterprise zone that were ended up being annexed. And seeing none, would you please call the roll to adopt their Mr. Paulo?
Sure. Cavan,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Ansel,
Yes.
Bostancic.
Yes.
Okay, resolution number 2020-32 passes. This brings us to the ordinance regarding the charter review, and because their names just appeared as fewer people got on, I see that you have other colleagues that must still be with us. Mr. Fitzgibbons, I think Jennifer Schatzer here, Louise Keating, and Craig, you're going to have to help me with your last name.
That's just Craig Sanders. He's got two things going.
Okay. So we have two other members from the Charter Review Committee, apparently along with Mr. Fitzgibbons, who has been here and waiting patiently. So before I get to you there, I will have Mr. Paulo read the title of ordinance number 2020-20.
Ordinance number 2020-20. An ordinance submitting to the electors of the city of Worcester, Ohio, amendments to the charter of the city of Worcester as provided in section 8.03 Charter Review and declaring an emergency.
And this is Mr. Sanders' ordinance, and it is slated for 3 readings. I turn the floor over to you, Mr. Sanders, wherever you may be.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we may know, or we should know, that every 10 years we are obligated to go through the city charter and review and make adjustments, corrections throughout the process of that document. At this particular point in time, the Charter Review Committee has met multiple times, and as you can see, as you were reviewing the documents, you can see that they have some changes. These changes will be put on a ballot for the November 3rd election. And again, as you were going through our paperwork, you could see that there will be 5 ballots with different sections of the specific of the charter that are being reviewed, or I should say being adjusted. As I went through this, most of this seemed correct to do, and just to clarify and clean up some verbiages. But I guess the only question that I have for the Charter Review Committee, and Mr. Fitzgibbon could probably answer that, is I see that related to the section 5 commissions and boards, that at this point there's been a suggestion to remove the term limits for anyone on the hospital board. And I was just curious as to how that conversation transpired and why the decision was made to go in that route.
Mr. Fitzgibbon, do you want to answer that, or you want me to address it?
I would be happier if you answered that, Mr. Scavelli.
Sure thing. So Mr. Sanders, that was actually a request. It was a joint request from both the city administration and from the hospital. And then when it was presented to the review board, they voted to move ahead with it. The reasoning behind it is that currently there are members on the hospital board of governors that are from the township and from the city. Because of the way the charter currently reads, the city members of the board of governors have term limits. The township members do not, which basically puts the city members at a disadvantage because they have to leave every so often, and the township members do not. That's really the reasoning for that. And it was a joint request, like I said, between the city administration and from the hospital.
Well, I know for myself, I sat on the charter review 10 years ago, and I know that request had also been submitted from the hospital at that point in time. And I guess from my personal standpoint, my only question is that I know the argument from the hospital has been made, due to the complications of the hospital operations, that it would make sense to keep someone on the board longer. I know the discussion that we had 10 years ago was the fact that, okay, if we're going to do that, then how are we creating some type of advantage or disadvantage by doing that? And then also, are we, how are we treating the other commission or board members equitably if we're terming them out at 12 years?
Well, I mean, that's a judgment call that city council will have to make. And then perhaps if city council agrees that it makes sense, then the voters. But really what it is I think it's trying to bring equity on the hospital board itself. And I really think that that's the main reason for doing it. It's just the city members right now are disadvantaged as opposed to the township members. I think that's really the main motivation.
Do we know how, this is Scott Myers, do we know how long each member from the township and versus the city has served? Do we have any idea of different tenures?
Mayor Brenneman.
I'm just going from memory here. I can take time and go over and grab a file and probably get it. But I think the longest serving member on the township is Tom Capek, who is probably 20 some years on there. And then the longest serving member from the city is Yvonne Williams. That is probably a year or possibly two shorter than Tom Capek. And then everybody else is less than that.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, or do you want me to?
I don't need the exact. I just was wondering kind of where the discrepancies were falling, and it sounds like that we've got a couple of longer serving, but then the rest are all lower and potentially within the 12 years that we're anticipating here. And anyway.
Yeah, and if I could weigh in, I'm not a big proponent of extended periods of times on boards. I think that the boards need to refresh. There is a difference with the hospital board just because it's like learning a different language for people that go on there unless they're in the medical field. And it does take a considerable amount of spin up time to understand everything that you're being asked to consider. So I do see a difference between the hospital board versus some other boards that we have here in the city.
Well, let me, with that statement, Mr. Brunman, how many of our city board members are not hospital background individuals?
Technically, the mayor is responsible to appoint one medical doctor to the board, and I did that with Dave Reynolds, and before Dave Reynolds, it was Jeff Perkins. So we have met that requirement. Everybody else on it does not have any type of medical background to my knowledge. I'm thinking through the board members, and I can't think of any right off the top of my head.
Mr. Sanders, maybe the law should be reconsidered to appoint additional people with medical backgrounds, not necessarily doctors, but there are people in other medical professions that might be able to serve and be up to speed faster and have familiarity with the acronyms and languages of healthcare and be more competent and able to serve on the hospital board.
I would disagree with that comment. Medical people are very difficult to ask to be on those boards because of the nature of the business that they're in. Actually, we have please don't tie future administration's hands because really you're looking for the best people no matter what kind of letters they have after their name, and you really want them to serve the public first.
Mr. Mayor, I have a quick question. If we do take term limits off, under the rare occasion when maybe somebody has served too long, is there a way to maybe to not have them on the board? Because I know that probably hasn't happened, but I'm just thinking possibilities.
I mean, you broke up a little bit there, Mr. Bistans. Did you say too long or Greg Long?
Too long. No, I just wanted to.
This is the ordinance that Greg Long told me he was going to be requesting, so that he didn't have to go off the board.
No, nothing to do with him. I just,
Okay.
just a question whether there's, if somebody's on there and for some reason shouldn't be any longer. Is there a mechanism to get a board member off without term limits?
The mayor has the responsibility of filling boards and commissions, and their terms are 4-year terms and are renewed every 4 years in the city. That covers really 5 members of the hospital board. The mayor is a board member by charter, according to section 10 in our, I think in our charter, or maybe section 3 or 4. And anyways, so that takes care of half the board members. The other half, each township that's a part of the hospital district, and there are 6 surrounding townships, all appoint 1 board member for a 4-year term, and the township trustees of that township make that appointment.
And the mayor can also choose to appoint someone different rather than reappoint someone after their term is up. So if there's somebody that you're unhappy with, they could just appoint someone new.
That is correct.
Well, with that, I mean, I had no intentions of moving this any further along than this evening. Want to let everyone have an opportunity to look at it, think about it. I want to thank the Charter Review Commission and all its members for their hard and diligent work to review it. We appreciate that, and we know, as our guidelines for our community, I mean, it does need its 10-year tune-up, and we appreciate your efforts.
Can I ask Craig? I just thought of a quick question for you. Does this piece of legislation doesn't require any sort of a public hearing before we pass it? I know the voters will have the final say on it, but as far as if there are people out there that might want to think about making some tweaks to what's been presented before it gets put into the electors.
No, there's no public hearing element with this. This will just simply be, that's why I say at this point, I'm going to leave this on first reading. If we don't get if I don't get a lot of comments on this, I mean, we'll move it along on second reading. And then, like you said, we do have a specific timeline that we have to comply with in order to get this on the November 3rd budget or November 3rd ballot. But we're far enough in advance on that, so it's not problematic. But we could go to 3. We could let it ride 3 times. But like I said, unless there's a lot of pushback between now and the second one, we might as well just pass it and move on. Let the voters leave it up to them to make a decision on it. With that, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, members of the Charter Review Commission that have hung in here almost 2 hours for this, and you're welcome to attend next meeting on the 15th if you want to weigh in on something that comes to mind, or email one of the council members. But I appreciate your work. I know how hard it is, first of all, to find qualified people to volunteer, and then you folks put in a lot of time and effort, and that does not go unrecognized, and nor is it unappreciated. So thank
President Biden, if I may add too, they also braved 2 blizzards and COVID-19 to come up with a recommendation. So I just want to thank them too. They were a pleasure to work with, and they just did an amazing job, and I was impressed with them every meeting. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll consider ordinance 2020-20 as having its first reading. And that will bring us to miscellaneous, and we'll start with Mr. Silvestri.
Thank you, Mr. President. We definitely covered a lot of ground tonight. Appreciate everybody's patience and involvement. I do want to thank Andre Dordia for his diligence. Just wanted to underscore from what you had told us, just to remind the public, 12.9 million in debt was refinanced for a savings of, I believe it was $1.4 million. So that is fantastic. And I also want to thank everyone for working together so that we could seize the opportunity for the Community Development Block Grant funds and use part of those for service to our social services and to serve our citizens in that way. So thank you. And that's all I have, Mr. President.
And next will be Mr. Myers, who's apparently out there in Green Acres with the silo behind him.
Thank you, Mr. President Biden. I have nothing further. That's the rendering of the certified Angus beef that we voted on, having the enterprise zone changed. I thought we would just throw it up as reference. I have nothing further.
I recognize the building. I was just giving you some gas there in terms that I was waiting for Arnold Ziffel to make an appearance. Mr. Sanders, top that.
Well, I can't really top that, but I can say simply this. Again, I want to thank the commission members that worked on the charter review. Thank you very much. I know a number of you, and I appreciate your hard work on that. I do want to make a comment related back to this goes back to the talking about the TIF, and Mr. Ansel had suggested that laws and ordinances take the lead on this, but I would have to actually say that I think laws and ordinances really is going to be the second seat player in this, and actually finance is going to be the one that's going to want to delve into the first part of this to determine how they're going to want to divvy these funds up, and then at this point, then we can come up with the nuts and bolts and how to make it all happen.
Or maybe it could be a collaborative effort, so we are all moving together in unison instead of piecemeal. I don't care. You guys are the committee chairs. You can decide between the two of you how you want to proceed.
Very well, thank you. That's all I have.
All right, good point. Mr. Ansel.
Yes, and I have no problem finalizing the guidelines, but it will be an ordinance within our codified ordinances. So yeah, I'm happy to do the due diligence and work with finance and the administration to come up with the guidelines. We did a request for Mr. Scavelli to come up with the Ohio Revised Code template, and then we can customize it. I think I understand the math well enough to with a reasonable guideline for the criteria for the TIF funding levels. So yeah, I'm happy to do that. Then we can flip it off to laws and ordinances for final review and resolution. But this is going to be an issue that all council is going to be involved with because it has such a significant financial impact for our community. We have great CRA guidelines and enterprise zone guidelines, but again, this is something new and unique, and we'll get it dialed in and get it in front of council ASAP so we can have another tool in our economic development toolbox. And other than that, I concur. Thank you for the charter committee's hard work and diligence during these trying times. I know I was involved with that 10 years ago, and it's a challenging and dubious process that requires a lot of time. And we had it sounded like this time there wasn't too many emotional or volatile issues. And we had some years ago as it relates to signs and different things like that. But I'm glad the process was smooth and it was finalized. And it sounds like we're moving forward on that. And a very productive meeting this evening. It was a busy evening. There was a lot of important business. And I want to thank council for, again, their hard work and dedication to get things done and get them done right for the citizens of Worcester. So other than that, that's all I have this evening, Mr. President.
Okay, Mr. Cavan.
Oh, I don't have anything to add other than everyone stay safe.
Good advice. Mr. Bostancic.
Yeah, I just want to ask the mayor a couple of quick questions. I was going to ask it earlier, if I could. I get a lot of questions about what how the COVID rates are going in Worcester. And what have you heard from the hospital, if anything?
Last report from the hospital was at the end of last week. To date, since the COVID started, we've only had 18 total COVID patients in our hospital. So very much lower than what the numbers were predicted to be. So we're very thankful for that. It really has not strained the resources there at all. In fact, it's sort of harmed the resources because we had to close down all of the other services that the hospital provided. So that's the latest that we have from the hospital.
And just one other, thank you. And just one other quick thing. When you mentioned the chalet and it's been booked, I think, starting June 15th. How is that going to affect our social distancing rules? Because if they have, are they allowed to have large parties in there, or would we have any liability to that if we allow large parties before the governor relaxes these rules?
Whatever we have scheduled for there has to meet the governor's and Dr. Amy Atkins the rules that they have in place, because we as a city organization have to follow the state law on that. So but now, like I think the wedding receptions have up to 300 people allowed to be in a wedding reception, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
I do not know what the actual rental is for that date, but the one that is scheduled right now, I think, meets the guidelines of the state structure. So that's the one that's possibly the first rental for us that's already received.
Okay, thank you.
And Ms. Warden, we'll give you the final word.
I don't have any words. I'm done. Thank you.
Well,
I'm
I
out.
see Mr. Ansel moving to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Kavanaugh. In favor, say aye.
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 Adjourn. Thank you, one and all. And, thank you for managing this, Mr. Scavelli.
You're welcome. And before everyone signs off, I just want to let you know that Shannon Waller was watching and she just wanted to thank everyone. So
good.
Thank you.
Right.
Good night.
Good night, and we'll see you on the 15th.
Have a good night, everyone.
You too.
Right.